welcome. Again, I'm Kyle Patrick. I'm the Director of Stewardship, the title that nobody knows what I do. It's super ambiguous, and I guess it's meant to be that way. I don't know, but I'm happy to be here. As Adam mentioned, I was a financial advisor. I've been a licensed financial advisor for over 13 years now. Starting off at Fortune 500 investment firms and also working in smaller independent practices. I've had a lot of experience with working individuals, and we're also working with like larger corporate organizations. 8 years ago when I came to Reality LA, I was sitting in the back of an auditorium and just feeling convicted that I needed to serve in some way. And over time, just God revealed that I had an opportunity to be able to share some of the things that I had learned from my profession, and that some people needed some of that advice within the church as well. So one, I just want to say I'm honored to be here and just thankful for you guys coming out. This is Equip Finances. This is a three-part series on finances and stewardship, where we're desiring to provide practical and theological equipping in the areas of money and stewardship. And maybe just like a quick show of hands, if this is your first time coming to this event, maybe raise your hand. Yeah? Oh, wow. Okay. That's a good amount. You guys are brave, and I thank you for your courage in coming here today. If you have been here, if this is like your second, or in Adam's case, fifth time coming, please raise your hand there. Well, we got a couple. All right, you guys are suckers. I don't know. Thank you for your bravery in coming back as well. I'm just thankful that you're here, and we're just praying that you're going to get something out of these 3 weeks. Before we get started, just a couple of notes. Throughout the series, you guys are probably going to have questions that are coming up as we're working through things, or maybe you even came in with specific questions. Because of the size of the class, it's probably not going to be possible to be answering those questions as we go. So what I would ask is just there's going to be a text-in question number. So if you have any questions, make sure that you're texting those in. Those will be anonymous. Adam is going to be backstage. He's going to be sifting through those and aggregating them. And at the end, we're going to do a Q&A. We're going to try to answer as many of those as we can. So just make a note of that. Send it in throughout the time, and we'll try to address those as we go. Let's see. Oh, something else also. If you came and you just heard about it through a friend, or maybe even heard about it this morning, and you showed up, we're thankful that you're here. If you haven't signed up for this yet, we just ask you to go to the website and actually sign up for it still. You can still show up. It's all right. We're not going to kick you out. But we're going to be sending out materials throughout the series, or giving you reminders if there's homework and stuff. Yes, I just said homework. Don't leave. It's going to be all right. Put the torches away. It's going to be all right. So if you can go to the website, realityla.com, you'll find it there, and just sign up, and that way you'll stay informed, okay? All right. Now, like any good talk, it's always best to start with disclaimers, right? Is that what they teach you in public speaking? Start with disclaimer? And it's not. But I'm going to do that. The first thing that you guys need to know is that we're not going to be collecting any of your information that's being worked on in here. Okay, so just know that anything when we're talking like budgeting or debt or anything like that, we're not going to say, pass that information in. That's your information. So just hang on to that and reserve any fears there. We're also not going to be asking you to share any information with people around you if you're not comfortable with it. So if you came here with your spouse, I would encourage you to speak. That's probably first. But second, yeah, just know that you don't need to share any of your personal information with anybody else if you're not comfortable with it. So just put those fears at ease, okay? We're going to be discussing concepts and not products. This is not a sales seminar or a get-rich-quick seminar, all right? There's no Bitcoin, and there is no amazing real estate opportunities here. So leave your purses and your wallets at home. Really what we want to be doing is we want to go over concepts and systems and suggestions that can be used to structure your personal finances, okay? We're hoping that you'll be able to apply these. I'm also not up here advising you as your personal financial advisor. Just know that I am an advisor, but I'm not advising you as your personal advisor. With everything, everybody's financial situations are different. What is suitable for one person may not be suitable for another person. So take these things, use wisdom and discernment to apply them to your own situation and see if it does make sense. But also just always encouraging you, sit down with a professional about your situation specifically so you can tailor it for your situation. Make sense? Fair? Okay. And last but not least, this series is not exhaustive, okay? Within 3 1.5-hour classes, there's no way for me to fully unpack everything that the Bible says about money and stewardship, nor can I teach you everything that there is to know about personal finances. So, pair expectations. It's better if we do it that way. If you guys pair expectations, I'll seem better, and you'll walk out of here a little bit happier, okay? But yeah, this is hopefully going to be a starting point for you, or maybe even a refresher. It just depends. And so I would just ask that you keep that in mind. Also note that with a room this size and with this many people here, we have people on all ends of the spectrum of where they're at in their financial lives. So as good Christians or people who know of the Bible, let's bear with one another, okay? And knowing that there may be sections that maybe don't apply to you, and that's okay. It might be speaking to somebody else, and there may be another time where it's speaking to you and not somebody else. And there's also something that I like to let people know is that finances are seasonal. They're not eternal. And our positions will change a lot throughout our lives. So even if something doesn't apply to you right now, it may apply to you in another season of your life. So let's all stay attentive, and you never know when we're going to need any of this information. Sound good? Sound fair? Have I talked you out of staying here? No? Okay, all right. Lock the doors, Samry? Good? Okay, we're good. we got him. All right. All right, well, I think anytime we're going into something like this, I think it's best that we actually look to the scriptures to get some kind of direction. And really, we want to look at, like, what does the Bible tell us about money? And what's really interesting is over the years and studying this more, the Bible has a lot to say about money. It's actually staggering. There are over 2,350 verses related to money and possessions. 16 out of the 49 parables in the Gospels relate to money. And in fact, 1 out of every 6 verses in the Gospels is related to money. There's a lot that is spoken of in regard to money and possession. So I would say in sheer volume alone, you can tell that money is important to God. And I would also say that God was able to use money as a way to relate other concepts and lessons because it was something that was relatable back then just the way it is relatable now. Most of us, can anybody function without money? Can anybody? It's a little hard. I don't know if you're like a survivor man or something, but outside of that, it's pretty difficult. So we know that that money is important to God and that He speaks about it a lot. And how we handle our money is a direct reflection of our relationship with God. There are at least 2 instances where Jesus, He gauges someone's spiritual condition based on their willingness to part with money. There's 2 examples. One of them is the story of Zacchaeus, and the other is the rich young ruler. Anybody remember these stories? In the message of Zacchaeus, he's a chief tax collector. He's a very wealthy individual, but he's also a despised individual because tax collectors were typically defrauding and skimming money off of the hardworking people in their town and their regions for their own benefit, to make themselves richer. And in that story, Jesus is coming through where he lives, and Zacchaeus is preparing for it. He goes and jumps up in a tree because he just wants to see Jesus. And Jesus calls out to him to come to him and to follow him. And when he does, he's embraced warmly, much to the chagrin of others. And Jesus sits down with him. And Zacchaeus, following Jesus' call to follow him, makes a decision to say that all of his revenue that's coming in, he's going to give half of that away to the poor, and that to anybody that he has defrauded, he's going to make whole 4 times over. And Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house. There's this amazing transformation, this call to follow and to give up these things, these possessions that he probably held very dearly. On the other side, there was the rich young ruler. He comes to Jesus, he's following him, and he's saying, how might I find salvation? And Jesus says, well, follow the law. He points him to the Old Testament, the law of Moses. And the rich young ruler confidently says, I do all these things. I keep all these things. And Jesus says, if you would be perfect, go, sell what you possess, and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me. And when the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. There's this stark contrast in the response of Jesus' call to these men and their lives. One who abandons everything and seeks after him and gives away these possessions, these comforts, and another who, in many concepts, is following him, yet is still trying to find salvation through himself. He's not following Jesus, and he's relying on his possessions, his wealth, to ultimately save him. And so he leaves discouraged. He leaves sorrowful, knowing that he can't do this. And so I think what's interesting to know here is that just as he was then, he is now. God is not as much concerned with whether you are wealthy or not. He's not concerned if you have money or not. The point of this is not the money. It's basically he's saying, I want your heart. I want your life. I want you to have your faith and trust in me as your provider and not these other things. And so one thing that we have to understand is that there are many things that vie for our attention and that we tend to, since the beginning of time in the fall, we put other things as idols to replace God and to find salvation on our own or through those things. So we know that money is important because it's a direct reflection of our relationship with God. God wants also to be the king of our entire lives, and our attitude on money impacts every aspect of our lives, including our relationship with God, ourselves, family, friends, the church, and our culture. The challenge is to understand God's view of money and then live our lives in line with his desires for us as well as with our finances. So, with that being said, what is money? And I know that sounds like a stupid question. I know that sounds super basic, but I'm going to press forward regardless. And to that I would say, really, to begin to understand the place of money and what money is, we have to go to the beginning. If you look in Genesis 1, 26 through 28, the Bible says, then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heaven and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps in the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on earth. This having dominion is a royal language we learn. Mankind was given a charge for these things as stewards. And for some of you who maybe haven't grown up in the church, you hear this steward word and you're like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make sense. Quite simply, being a steward is being entrusted with something that is not your own, that has some value, and you're entrusted to take care of it. Anybody as a child ever have their parent or a sibling or an aunt or uncle give you something that you perceive to be really valuable, and they say, hey, buddy, take care of that. And you hold on to that thing, and that is like the most important thing to you ever. My father did this to me once. We were out rock climbing, and he gave me his ring. And what did I do? I promptly dropped it down the side of a mountain, and I was I was probably more terrified than in my entire life. That was what was called being a bad steward. But I spent the next 40 minutes searching for this ring, scouring the mountainside in Phoenix, and I finally was able to find this thing dangling on a limb of a tree. Makes no sense. It makes no sense of how that happened, but I found it, and I remember coming back and feeling this pride of being able to return what was entrusted to me, that I was faithful to my father. This is what it means to be a steward. It means that you are given something of value, of importance, and you are entrusted with it to care for it for someone else. So we find out that we have been given dominion over the earth, and that we have this royal language of being stewards. But we also find that the earth does not belong to us. Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all we have in it." You see, it belongs to God, but he has entrusted it to all of us as stewards. As those made in his image, we were created to rule in his place and to reflect him in the way we tended and cared for the earth and all that is in it. It's pretty amazing. And when we think back to the story of Genesis, Adam and Eve, they were given everything. One word that could be used to describe the condition of man and woman in the Garden of Eden is wealthy. They had all provision. They had everything that they could ever imagine. They walked and communed with Jesus and God. They were there together. There was a peace. There was a shalom that was there. They were wealthy by God's standards. And throughout the Bible, one's wealth is often described in terms of their possessions. It was flocks and herds, camels, servants, things of this nature. And wealthy individuals who are mentioned in the Old Testament are Abraham and Lot and Solomon. Their possessions, what had been entrusted to them was beyond measure at times. They were considered very wealthy. And so wealth is determined by how much of God's creation has been entrusted to someone. Repeat that again. Wealth is determined by how much of God's creation has been entrusted to someone. And over time, as people began using currency out of simplicity, instead of having to bring your flock of goats or flock of goats? I don't think they're a flock. Your herd of goats. You can tell I was not raised on a farm. But instead of bringing these things to a market to trade them for goods or materials or services, they just carried a wallet or a purse or something like that. And now we just tap with our phones, and that's how we do it. It's convenient. But in that change of exchanging God's creation for something else, in a sense, we've lost the direct connection between wealth and creation. In a sentence, money is a placeholder for the goodness in God's creation. Instead of carrying the raw materials of creation with you, you carry something that has value. And that value, that's something that's been determined by how much of God's creation it can be traded for. Does that make sense? We don't necessarily trade God's creation, but it's still valued when how much of God's creation we can receive for it. And so our use of money is directly tied to our stewardship of this earth. It still applies to us this day. We've still been entrusted with God's creation. And so that's part of our overall stewardship is in our money. It's directly tied back to the beginning and God's entrusting of the earth to us. And so, what is the source of our wealth? Well, most people in this world believe that we work to make money. I mean, that's how many people have heard, hey, I'm just working to pay the rent. How many people feel that at times, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, lots of hands. And that's pretty common in our culture is is that we work to make money. But what's interesting is that I think the Bible disagrees with that. It disagrees with such a direct jump in logic in that there's a step missing. You see, that step is that God actually created us to work. We work the ground, and as we work the ground produces food. God provides as we do what we were created to do, and he provides through our work. So some of you might be sitting here and going, okay, semantics. You're like, yes, I work, and then it produces, it maybe doesn't produce livestock or fruit or anything like that, but like I work, I get money, I have provision. But where I would challenge that is that when we have that mentality of, well, I work because I have gifts and skills, and I receive this money, and then I have this provision, the focus is always on ourselves. We constantly are focused on ourselves. And what happens in that, it may be not immediate, but there typically is some kind of gradual decay towards entitlement, towards disparity, or even looking at others as, well, I earned these things. I deserve this. I have done this. I've worked hard, and clearly these people who don't have this did not, and they don't deserve it. I'm not giving a social commentary to you right now. I'm not giving you any political beliefs. But what I am saying is that we must begin to realign our thinking and an understanding of where these things came from. We don't work to make money. We work because we are subjects of a God who created this earth, this heaven, who gave it and entrusted to us, and who also instilled in us a desire and a burden and a need to work. So if you think of it this way, we are created. We were given certain skills and abilities. These were not of our own making. They were designed and made for us uniquely. We were given a desire and a burden to work. We've been able to have jobs. If we have those, we are blessed. And the money and the fruit that comes from that is not because of our own doing. It's because of a God and a Creator who loves us, who is faithful to us, who has given us abundantly. And so therefore, our view and our mentality then begins to change from one of entitlement to one of gratitude and one of thanks. We begin to look at other people, and we begin to realize that the money that we have, we're working with house money right now. These things are not our own. They can be taken away at any time. They're not our own. And so with those things, we begin to be better stewards. We begin to think of having a ring from our Father, and we want to be faithful with that. We want to do good with that. We want to bless others with that. When we work because we were created to work, and when we do, God provides for us. We understand that. And when he provides, we have a responsibility to use it, not from a sense of ownership and entitlement, but we steward it from a place of gratitude. Amen? Amen. All right. Before we move on, let's just take a quick second and pray, okay? Heavenly Father, we just come before you so grateful and in awe of your creation. Thank you for this world. Thank you for this earth that you have entrusted to us. Thank you for creating men and women in your image. Thank you for the gifts and abilities that you've given us. Thank you for a desire to have a purpose to work within this world. Thank you for the jobs that you've provided, and we pray for jobs if they are not there right now. We thank you for the provision that you provide to us and that you are faithful. We just ask that we would be good stewards, that we continue to learn and have this information, this knowledge just press into our hearts. Father, create change in us. Help us to be renewed daily, understanding how blessed and grateful we are. We thank you so much, and it's in your Son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So as we move on, I think it's important that we shift our focus and we actually start talking about some of the practical lessons and tools in regards to money. But first, as I do that, I'm big on disclaimers, if you haven't noticed. lots of disclaimers for a class. But there's certain financial attitude pitfalls that I would say that I have seen over the years when I've done classes like this or when I've sat down and worked with clients. And so I think it's probably good for us to maybe address some of these up front and identify them just in case so that you can identify if maybe some of you are currently in that position. But also as we're working throughout the material here, you can identify if some of these pitfalls are starting to set in so you can address it and move forward, okay? So financial attitude pitfalls. The first one is, I would say it's the pitfall of ignorance. It's if I don't pay attention to my finances, savings, bills, etc., then they don't exist. It's not my problem. Just blindly swipe the card and just on with your day. So there is the ignorance approach. I'm putting you on notice. Ignorance is no longer accepted. I'm sorry, guys. It's a pitfall, and we're going to avoid that going forward now. The second is the digging out of a hole approach. It's I know it's bad, but I'm just going to continue to keep doing the same thing, and hopefully it's going to get better. I think Albert Einstein's definition of insanity is like doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. I've totally been guilty of this at points in my life. You'll find that most of what I'm talking about here is from my failures and not from my successes, so understand that I'm there with you. From a clinical perspective, we could probably diagnose this as avoidance or denial. So we're going to stay away from avoidance and denial as well. Another one that can be big in the church, and I'm not throwing stones right now, I'm just calling it as what it is. It's the all God and no personal accountability approach. It's the God will take care of it regardless of what I do. I think it was last year in one of Pastor Jeremy's teachings, he walked us through Nehemiah 4, where God's people were faced with amazing and incredible challenge and opposition, and their response was to pray and have faith, but also to plan and to work. You see, some might take the approach of prayer and faith in God only, and while faith in God for provision is right, we still must plan and take action. This is like praying for a spouse, but it doesn't exclude you from actually going out and asking somebody on a date or swiping left or right. I have no clue what the direction is. I've been out of the game for a while, so bear with me. It all breaks down. Anyways, you get the point. We got to go out and do something. Some might take the approach of prayer and faith in God alone. So yes. Conversely, others might solely focus on the planning and work and forget about the one who ultimately has provided. It leads us to hearts of entitlement and self-reliance, similar to what I was just talking about before. So we must have faith and trust in God, but we are still tasked and planned to plan and be responsible, okay? So what is this class all about? How many of you know why you're here? Were you just drug here, or are you guys like ready to go? Yeah? You ready to go? Okay, I like it. A few of you actually thought we were hating out finances today. I'm sorry, that's not in the cards. But hopefully, this is something far more valuable and lasting. Maybe before we get started, what would be good is why don't you look to maybe the person to your left or right or around you, introduce yourself, and just let them know maybe what is one thing that you're hoping to get out of these 3 classes. Okay, let's take a couple seconds right now and let's do that, okay? All right. Let's bring it back in. Again, I'm excited that all of you are here. I'm excited that all of you have made a commitment into this very important area of your life. When we're talking about, why are we here, what's this all about, I think it falls into three categories. One, I think it's stewardship. As we talked about earlier, it goes back to Genesis 1, really, literally the beginning, that we were created in the image of God, a God who created the heavens and earth and everything within it. We received this inheritance and a charge to care for it. So ultimately, everything is God's. It's not our own, and we're entrusted to care for it. And knowing that, this should radically affect the way that we live. So this changes the way that we live. That's what this is partly about. We should be a body whose lives are marked by generosity, giving sacrificially, joyfully, and graciously. We understand everything that we've been given, and so therefore we're more emboldened to be generous in the way that we live our lives, the way that we approach people in the city, the way that we care for people in our communities. Being good stewards means that our lives will look differently in how we handle our time, our talents, our finances, our bodies, creation, our priorities, and the gospel. This goes so much beyond just what do we do with our money and how much are we saving or how much do we tithe and this and that. This is so much deeper. This cuts to the core of who we are. This is part of being a Christian and somebody who has been transformed. Furthermore, in knowing that everything we have is not our own, but also that it has been entrusted to us, should affect the way that we plan. We all have probably heard the parable of the talents, but what if we actually viewed the master as God and us as the servants? When we received our paychecks, if we were viewing it in that light, that weight of responsibility, how would that affect the way in which we plan with our money? So these are some of the things, this is some of the concepts that I want us to be thinking about. And I know that that's going to go beyond just the time that we have in here. Hopefully these are things that as a couple, as an individual, as communities, that we're going out besides here, and we're really praying through this. We're really thinking on this, meditating, discussing. So if I can simplify it, I would say that's what this is about, okay? With that, we're also going to try and give you some practical knowledge. And so today's session is going to be on the B word. It's going to be on budgeting, all right? And somebody said yes. All right. This is a shock. That's literally never happened. God bless you. Good people. Is this a 4-letter word in anybody's household? It can be in mine. I'm not going to lie to you. Honey, I love you. Love you. But this could be a 4-letter word for some people. And it's not exactly the best way to get a party started, like it's Friday night walking in, Kyle, what's up? Just getting my budget in line. Like, what? Yeah, you're going to go stand over here. But with that being said, I found that this is the basis for everyone's financial foundation. When I meet with new clients, regardless of where they're at, if they're just starting out or if they are, financially free and retired or something like that, I always begin with the budget. It all starts there. We must look to see what is our income and what are our expenses. Only after we have a firm understanding on this can you actually really build upon it. You need to have an assessment, and it always starts with that. What is income? What are expenses? So to begin, we will first look at what we're spending our money on. We must identify our expenses, and then we need to classify them. So has anybody heard of a fixed expense before? Anybody heard of that? Any brave souls want to maybe shout out what you think some fixed expenses are? Rent? Car insurance? Medical insurance? Yeah? No, these are all correct. Good job. When we're looking at fixed expenses, these are typically consistent in amount and frequency on a monthly or an annual basis, and they're typically our most important costs. So, again, think rent, think car payment, think insurance, Netflix, just... Anybody watching The Crown right now? I'm just saying, it's good. Don't judge me. I see you. Conversely, on the other hand, we have variable expenses. And these are really, I would say, these are the fun expenses. These are typically ones that will fluctuate in amount and frequency from month to month. Some examples of that are, entertainment-related charges, coffee, travel, all just the good things in life. So now that we know the difference in the types of our expenses, what we want to do is to begin to categorize our spending and to build out our average monthly budget, okay? So if you could pull out the handouts that we printed for you. They were, I believe they were on the tables as you were walking in. If you didn't receive one of those when you came in, just raise your hand. We have some people on our team who will come by and hand those to you. So we're going to be working for those. If you can just pull them out. And if you look in the first section, which is for fixed expenses, we have listed some examples that are common for some people. But note, this isn't exhaustive. So what I'm just going to ask is, I want you to tailor this for your budget and add in additional items. Make this as specific as possible, okay? I want you to avoid the all-inclusive miscellaneous category, okay? All right, minimize that as much as possible, if not completely eliminating, all right? We want to be really, really specific. And so, again, we've put some general categories. You may not have some of those, that's okay. Add as many as you need, add on to this, write in the ledgers, and that's fine. So we want you to make this as specific as possible. So complete this worksheet with just the fixed and variable expenses with monthly amounts, God bless you. And these can be monthly averages, okay? So if an expense happens on a non-monthly interval, say annually or quarterly, you're just going to divide that by 12 or by 4, okay? And then obviously, if they're variable expenses, you're just kind of taking a guesstimate. You know, I assume on a given month I spend this much on gas, unless you've already kind of looked and gotten an average for that. If it's things that are like gifts for example, that may not be like a fixed monthly expense. That may be more like certain birthdays throughout the year and then Christmas presents at the end. What I would do is just kind of total up what you think an annual amount you spend is and divide it by 12. That make sense? Yep? Okay. So what I want you to also do, something else to know. You'll notice that there's a rank column on the side there. And I know there's some very ambitious people in here who are just like, we're going to rank these. It's going to be awesome. Just chill. Just bring it down. We're going to get there. But for this part of the exercise, just leave it be, okay? We'll get to that later. I'll explain it, okay? So let those go. And also note that these are your personal worksheets, okay? So we're not going to be passing these in. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't need to share these with anybody unless you're working with somebody on this today, okay? So let's take a few minutes. Let's break right now. I want you to work on these and to begin to put all of your fixed and variable expenses down on paper, okay? Let's go. Okay. So now that we have an idea as to what our fixed and variable expenses, or at least we have a good start on where they're at, we must turn to the other side of cash flow and understand what is coming out. What is our income, okay? So to answer that, we need to know what type of wage earner you are. Are you a W-2 employee of a company, or are you a 1099 independent contractor, okay? If you are an employee of a company, you receive a W-2, and as a W-2 employee, payroll taxes are deducted from your paycheck and paid to the government through your employer. And we're going to go over this a little bit later. This is the super fun portion of the program, guys. So just, as you can tell, like, pair your emotions right now. But it's important that we have an understanding of what type of wage earner you are so that we can actually properly calculate this on this side of your cash flow worksheet, okay? So that's if you're a W-2 employee. The other side is if you're an independent contractor or if you're self-employed, you're receiving your full rate of pay without any taxes deducted, okay? You're responsible for this withholding. And so we need to know where all of your money is coming from, okay? This is really important for all of us. So you may have a job and it's a W-2 salaried position, and so this is probably pretty easy for you. You know, it's like, you know, my salary is $40,000 a year, and, you know, I have one job. So congrats, this is going to be easy for you. For others, you may be like a base salary, but also like receiving commission that will fluctuate from month to month. Or maybe you have an hourly rate, but you receive tips. And so there's going to be fluctuation from month to month. For this exercise, it will be important for you to come up with like a monthly average, okay? You're going to have to figure out what like a typical month looks like for you and what you bring in between the two of those. Others may have multiple jobs. You may work freelance and collect money from various sources. You may receive royalties for past work or investment income from securities or real estate. So you may have money that's coming in from a lot of different places. It's important to identify that and also include it into your budget. You must identify where all of your money is coming from first, and then create an average monthly total. So you'll do this by, one way that you can do this is that you can take your 2017 amount, if you know how much came in all of 2017, and then you can just divide that by 12. And that might be one of the easiest ways to do it. For others, you may need to forecast forward because you know that, I had this job last year, but it's not going to happen this next year, and so I need to reduce my income. Or I'm expecting that I'm going to be landing these other jobs, and there's going to be this pay increase or whatever it may be. So you can project, but do the same thing again and divide it by 12 and get it to an average monthly income amount. So once we know how much money is coming in, we then need to know if it's net or if it's gross. And again, some of you are looking at me like eyes glazing into the back of your head, like, what are you talking about? I'm going to go over that. So gross is, this is our income before taxes and withholdings, all right? So if you are, again, using that analogy of a $40,000 per year salary, that is your gross amount. Nothing has been taken out of that. That's the set amount there, okay? Now, net is referring to, this is our income after taxes and withholdings have been taken out, okay? Does that make sense? Yep, following? Great. So, net and gross, that's that. To fully understand our income, we also need to understand what taxes and deductions we pay. This is everybody's favorite topic, right? Going over taxes and deductions. Well, we're going to try and power through this then, okay? So, there are a few certainties in life, death and taxes, as they say. So we should probably talk about it just a bit. If you are a W-2 employee and you brought a copy of your pay stub with you, this would be a great time to pull it out and reference it. Or for any of you who don't have that, maybe pull that up tonight or sometime this week and just take a look over your pay stub and actually see what's going in and what's coming out. If you first look, usually on a pay stub at the top left, you're going to see a larger pay amount. And this is either your salary or the hours worked for a pay period prior to the taxes being taken out. So this would be our gross pay. Yes, good job. Below that, you may see different benefit deductions that are coming out. This could be like your health insurance, retirement withholdings, things like that. Most health insurance premiums are deducted from your wages before taxes, which reduces your taxable income, which is great. You also want to check your retirement plan if you're saving into that or it's offered through your employer to see if you're saving money on a pre-tax basis through like a 401k or a 403b, or if it's after-tax money, if it's coming in the form of a Roth employer-sponsored plan. And these are some things that we'll go over in the third class, so don't dismay if you're not sure what I'm talking about now. To the right of your pay stub is usually where we're going to see taxes that are being deducted, and the big ones that you'll see coming out are federal, which is money that's going to our federal government, and then also state, money that we're paying to the state of California. If you have a tax bracket, each of us have a tax bracket that is based on our income and filing status for both federal and for state. And you determine the amount of taxes that are withheld in each paycheck by completing what's called a W-4 form through your employer. And this is typically done in your onboarding when you go to a new job. And this will determine how much you owe come tax time, if you owe or you receive a refund come April. And this is also something that that is not set in stone. If at some point you need to update and change this, you just need to go to your HR professional and you can change and adjust that. So be aware of that. So I know some of you probably prefer big refunds each year, while others you try to keep more in your paycheck, but you might owe more when it comes time for April and you have your taxes prepared. As a friend once said to me, pay to Caesar what is Caesar's, but not a penny more. Guys, it's not gonna get any better than that. Yeah, that's about all I got. You're just gonna have to bear through some of these corny finance jokes and just accept me as I am. I'm sorry, honey. Okay, we're gonna move on. As a rule of thumb, I would suggest that you work with a tax advisor to set your withholding amount at a rate that puts you as close to breaking even as possible, okay? A large refunds, that means that you're just giving the government a large interest-free loan for the year, and you don't really get a thank you or anything. You just get it back a year later, instead of you being able to use that for your own planning. Conversely, if you are not withholding a lot, you could be owing the government a lot in interest and penalties if you're not able to pay the amount owed come April. So I would say try to, it's somewhat of a game, but try to get it as close to break even as possible on either side of wherever your comfort level is. But work with a tax professional to make sure that you're getting it to the right spot, okay? Taxes are withheld for Social Security and Medicare as well. You'll see that on your paycheck, and this is referred to as FICA. The current rate is 6.2%, and it's paid by you as an employee, but it's also matched by your employer. So you'll see another section on there that says employer taxes, and it has the same amount listed as what you have for your Social Security and Medicare as well. So if you're a W-2 employee, go thank your employer maybe at some point this week, and they'll say, what? And it'll be a little unity thing. It'll be great. If you take your total pay that was up at that top left corner and you subtract any deductions and employee taxes, you're going to arrive at your net income for that pay period, which is the amount that gets that's the one that we all care about, right? That's the one that gets deposited into your bank account. And so it's an important distinction to make between what is gross and what is net, because if you make your salary is $40,000, we know that that's not what you actually take home, right? That's not what you're really working with. So we need to have a good understanding of what's coming out and really what is the net amount that you're going to be budgeting with, and that's what we're going to go off of, okay? It's also important to know if you're self-employed and receiving your income via 1099, that you're receiving your gross income that we said, and you're responsible for the taxes that need to be withheld. You need to pay for both the employee as well as the employer portion of tax for FICA, okay? So you're doing both sides of those. Being your own boss is not always good, so you gotta pay a little bit more in taxes. You typically should be paying estimated quarterly taxes if you are self-employed, which means that you're going to be setting up recurring payments to the federal and state government for what you assume your income is going to be for the year. This is a little unknown fact: the government wants their money, so take that for what it is, and they want to make sure that you're scheduling these things out. So. If you're self-employed, you need to account for your taxes and withholdings as an expense in your budget in order to properly save, okay? So now that we have walked through your expenses and income, it's time for us to actually put these things together, okay? So if you will please open your packets back up to the monthly financial statement. In the income portion, you should be entering your net income from wages or salary if you're a W-2, if you have a W-2 income, all right? So you're going to put your net amount, the one that's hitting your bank account, in there. Below that, you're going to add any other 1099 income. And what I would say there, or if you purely receive your income by 1099, is either enter the net figure in there, meaning like what it would be after taxes, or put the gross amount in of what's coming in on average, and then add to your expense, your fixed expense worksheet, a tax column, and just put that in there, okay? We don't want to double book or not enter it at all. We just want to make sure it's accounted for one way or the other. So on your 1099, either enter the net figure after taxes or put the gross and then add it as a separate expense. All right. Then below income, if you haven't already accounted for like giving, saving, investing in your fixed or variable expenses, I want you to add those to your worksheet in that section below there, okay? So these could be amounts that that are going into your savings account, money invested for retirement or something else, money that you're giving to the church or some other charitable organization. We need to account for these things in our budget as well. And then underneath that, this is where you're going to add your total estimated monthly fixed and variable expenses, okay? And then follow the instructions on the worksheet to add your living expenses with the donation and savings totals. And then at the bottom, subtract them from your total monthly income figure, okay? Is that making sense? So we're going to be adding up all of those expenses, and if giving, saving, investing wasn't already in it, we're going to add those up as well, and then we're going to subtract those from our total income sources, all right? Okay. So what I want you to do now is take a couple minutes, look at that a little bit more, fill in the income, get a good sense for what your averages are, and complete that sheet. So we're going to break for about 5, and again, if you have any questions, just let me know. All right, so how do we do? How do we do for those of you who actually finished? If you came up with a total monthly income amount, or if this week after you finish, you come up with a total monthly income amount and you subtracted it from your savings and donations as well as your living expenses, and if you had a positive number, congrats, you are living in the black or from a surplus. So congrats, that's great. Conversely, if you did the same thing and it resulted in a negative number, you are living in what we would call the red or at a deficit. And I just want to like stop and pause here for a second, because if you are feeling down or overwhelmed as you're going through this, I just want to encourage you to hang in there and stay engaged. Many people in the U.S., and especially really expensive cities like Los Angeles, find themselves currently or at some point in their life running a deficit. I know the same was true and has been true for me at points of my life. And with that can come shame. With that can at times come despair and defeat. And this class is not about that. This class is not about bringing any of those things on you. This class is hopefully about bringing hope and beginning to bring steps to move forward out of that, okay? So it's also important to note that regardless of the amount of money that you make, people tend to spend what they have or what they make. Yes, higher income may allow for more grace with kind of careless spending, but deficit budgets can be found across the wage spectrum. So while more income can help us at times, it doesn't always correct the problem. If we are not good stewards with little now, how will we be good stewards with much? And so these are things that we have to remember and understand. We must begin to correct our behaviors and our attitude and understand that more money is not always the solution. Sometimes we need to take our lumps, and we need to realize that we can't just earn our way out of a way or a pattern of living. We need to actually correct it at the source, okay? So we need to, and hopefully what we understand is that it's important for us to get ourselves in line with where our current financial position is, and to make sure that we're being good stewards of what we have been entrusted with, okay? So maybe real quick, if you could just indulge me, if everybody could just stand up right now. Just stand up real quick. And what I want you to do is I just want everybody to turn and look at everybody else and go, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right, guys. It's going to be all right. All right, now I want everybody to take a deep breath in and exhale. Now take your seats. We're going to be all right. It's going to be okay. Hallelujah. All right. Now what I want you to do is I want you to go back to your worksheets right now. And I want you to look. That came out wrong, right? All right, well, now I want you to get back to reality. All right. Let's go back to the worksheets. And if you remember those columns in the beginning that are labeled rank, okay? And what I want you to do is is outside of here this week is I want you to go through and I want you to actually rank your expenses in order of priority, okay? And not just variable and fixed separately. I want you to view them in aggregate, all of your expenses together, okay? And I want you to rank them. So let's say you have 30 expenses total between your variable and your fixed. 1 would be the most important, and 30 would be the least. Make sense? Okay, so most important are usually essentials like food and shelter, giving, things like this. But note that the priority is not an affirmation of the amount of money that you're spending in that category, okay? Some of you might actually be looking at your expenses right now and like, I spend how much at Whole Foods? You know, like food is important, maybe not that important. No shame on Whole Foods, no shame. So just know that. You can look and rank those, and it's not an affirmation of how much you're spending in that category, but what it represents. That make sense? Okay. So I want to, as part of your homework this week, I want you to begin to go through that and begin to rank those in order of priority. And then once you do that, you're going to take your total income figure from the monthly financial statement, and then what I want you to do is I want you to begin to reduce that total income amount by your expenses in order of their rank, okay? So let's say that your total income figure is $2,000 per month. What you're going to do is first take expense ranked number 1, and you're going to subtract it by that. And then you're going to move to number 2, and so on and so forth, okay? You're going to do that, and you're going to go all the way until your expenses or your income runs out. And whatever line item it is that it runs out on, if you're running a deficit right now, I want you to circle that or star it, highlight it, whatever it is. And should I just do a dramatic pause? Like, what's he going to say? What's he going to do? What you're going to do is, as we work to be good stewards and live within our means, you either need to do one of 3 things, okay? You either need to cut out all expenses below that number because you've deemed that they're not as important. That's 1. 2 is you're going to reduce the amount of the spending of the expenses above that so more things can actually fall in line, okay? Or step 3, and what it usually is it's a combination of both of those. We probably need to do a self-examination and say, what is really important, what is not, what can we spend less in so we can bring more in? We all need to do this, and typically it's every 6 months or so we probably need to recheck everything again and go, is this really important? Is my spending in line with my priorities? Does this seem reasonable? So I know that this isn't an easy task. This requires oftentimes a very hard conversation in the mirror with your significant other, but it's essential for moving forward because running a deficit or not planning and being generous isn't sustainable nor what God has called us to be. So I'm tasking you to begin to do this hard work this week, okay? Let's commit to doing this hard work this week. Another way that we move forward, because I know that's a lot of what you're asking, is like, okay, how do we get going? Is that we need to have systems that can help us set our finances up in a way that aligns with our values and priorities and keeps us accountable to our budget. If any of this is going to be lasting change, then we must be intentional. If we're not intentional, this is haphazard, we're never going to stick to this. We're never going to make any progress. So we have to be intentional. So here are some systems that have helped me personally, that have helped other clients of mine. Also know that these are not the only way. This is not the gospel. This is just some suggestions, okay? So take this for what it is, all right? The first one that I've suggested is what we call like the autopilot system. Essentially, this is establishing various checking and savings accounts and having intentional amounts of money directly deposited into each of them from your paycheck, okay? Anybody heard of the, like, pay yourself first? Anybody ever heard that statement before? I heard that all the time when I was in college and when I was growing up. I had no clue what it meant. I was, like, lost. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll be a financial advisor, and I probably should figure this out. So it was interesting. As I was getting started as a financial advisor, I noticed that there was a difference in the order of how my successful clients and those who were struggling were using their money. It was apparent when I'd sit down, and it took me a little while to kind of figure it out. But But what I kind of pinned it down to is that those who were getting ahead seemed to be prioritizing, giving to charity, saving and investing their money first, and then spending the rest on things second. That was the priority that they did, and which was totally counterintuitive to the way that I was raised. It made no sense to me, but it seemed to be consistent. They were first aligning their money with God's purposes and in places where they were receiving an interest rate rather than spending it on things or paying other people an interest rate for their money. And then saving and investing, giving whatever was left over at the end, which is usually not. I mean, how many can relate to that? As we get this paycheck, it's like Friday, we're like stoked. We're like, let's do this. Sugarfish tonight. It's just, sushi. And yeah, and then, about 5 days later, you're just like, oh, yeah, what do I do now? And then, the basket passed, and you're kind of like, ugh. There we go. Next time, the next week it's like sugarfish. It's a cycle. It's so good though. So what I would say is note that everyone may not be able to significantly do this, but it's something that hopefully all of us can begin to work into. All right. With anything, you have to begin to develop certain healthy habits. It's like working out or anything else. It's difficult in the beginning. You're changing routines, but it's something that hopefully all of us can begin to work into. And it's just like a brief example is like, for me, when I started off, my way of doing this, because I wasn't making really any money and didn't have much to work with, was I got 3 piggy banks from a 99-cent store, and I set them in my room, just like so I could have a tangible, physical thing to look at and a reminder. And each week, I would, literally be like putting pennies or $1 or whatever it was in. But for me, it was just reinforcing a habit that was healthy and that was leading me in this direction towards realigning my priorities. So you can start small and hopefully eventually work into a larger way, okay? So we can begin to develop these habits by paying yourself first something each month at the very beginning, regardless of the amount. You just need to start somewhere, okay? So maybe this week you begin to start somewhere if you're not already doing this. So the first thing would be you get paid and you automatically have something directly deposited into an account that is specifically designated for giving, saving, and investing, okay? This can be a savings account or whatever it may be that you determine, but you have that money directly deposited in there first thing, so you know that this is happening. This is not going to be, pass the basket, see what's left over. You're doing this intentionally, and it's done, okay? The next thing that you're going to be doing is having the next amount of money directly deposited into a checking account that is specifically for your fixed expenses. You remember your fixed expenses. These are our most important expenses typically, and we're going to designate exactly how much those typically are within a month. What do we need to survive and make sure that those are paid for? And we're going to have that amount directly deposited into that checking account. And then lastly, we'll have a third account, which is usually another checking account, and we have that set up for our variable expenses. And this is our fun money, as I call it. And we have whatever's left over after those first two things are done. So you see how we've inversed the order? We've switched it around, but hopefully we're aligning it more towards the values and towards the generosity that we want to exhibit, which is caring for people, showing generosity, taking care of the most essential things in our lives, and then spending our things on the other stuff last. And it's not that we can't spend money on things that are fun, but we're just making sure that the priority is inverted and it's shifted into the right direction, okay? Why I love this and why I loved the fun money variable expense account is because for me, it freed me up to purchase things, and I didn't have to fear if I could afford it or not. If it was in there, I'm like, is this affecting my rent? Is it, my insurance going to be going? Like all these different things. You don't have to worry about that because it's already accounted for in another account. I would suggest that within that fixed expense account that you don't have a debit card attached to it. It's just saving yourself from yourself, okay? I know, I'm getting some looks right now. Like, yeah, you are crazy. What are you doing? if you can, don't have a debit card attached to your fixed expense account so you're not tempted to use that money on Sugarfish or any other fun things, okay? Keep it there and set up maybe automatic drafts from that account for your fixed expenses so it's automatically just coming out. And if you're transferring the right amount into it every month, you don't have to worry. It's there, okay? Other thing that I would say is maybe set up your savings account at a different institution than where your checking accounts are, where you're doing your regular spending. I know I said earlier ignorance is not something that we're going to go with, but I'm going to say out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, that's cheating. But anyways, if you put these things into another institution, it's still accessible, it's still your money, but sometimes just having it out of your peripheral can help you to not take that money and use it for things that you weren't intending it for, okay? Other thing that you really need to do if you were going to set up something like this is to check with your bank and see if they have a minimum balance requirement or if they have fees that will hit your account if you're setting it up in this way. Sometimes you have to do a minimum direct deposit into it or keep a minimum balance. You would certainly want to make sure that you're keeping in line with the rules of your checking accounts so that you're not going to get billed with fees and stuff like that every month. If that is the case, you might want to look at another bank account or a different way to set up and approach your accounts, okay? Don't move backwards to try and move forwards. That's essentially what I'm saying. So do your research there. And if you have variable income, some of you who maybe aren't W-2 employees, you're saying like, I'm an actor or independent contractor, like my money, income fluctuates a ton from month to month. If you have that, you can still do this, but you need to be operating off of a percentage basis and not a fixed dollar amount basis. So what I mean there is that you can still do the same thing. You can still align the way that your money comes in, but you have to do it by a percentage. So you might say, you know what, giving, saving, investing, this is 20% of all of my income. And so when money comes in, you take 20% out, you put it in that account first. And fixed expenses account for 60% of my income, and so it goes into that account, and then the remaining portion then goes into the variable account. So you'll be doing it by percentage, not by dollar amount, but you can still do the same thing. So some months, you may have big swaths of money that are going into these different accounts, and others it may be smaller, but the premise still remains the same, okay? Another approach that some people may use is the envelope system. It's using cash for all of your expenses. So what you would do, it's really simple and basic. You just create envelopes for all of the expenses that you talked about that you can, and that you're going to fill those up each time you're paid with the amount that should be going into it for the month. And throughout the month, you're using and pulling money out of those different envelopes to pay for groceries or whatever it may be. And at the end of the month, if there isn't any money in the account, you're not paying. You're not going to be able to buy anything else in that category. If there's anything left over, you can either roll it to the next month and have more money in that envelope, or you can take it out and you can put it towards like your generosity into one of those other categories. So for some of you, operating with a card, a debit card or something like that can be really difficult and sometimes just hard to keep track of how much have I spent on groceries this week or this month, and it can be difficult. So sometimes this is a good way to get started, or especially if you haven't had a budget before, this might be a good beginning step for you and one to keep you on track. So those are just two different systems that you could think about using in terms of setting up your account or ways that you can be purchasing things throughout the month. Another way that we move forward is by staying accountable. And a few ways that we do this are one, we can set up a system for tracking our spending. There's lots of free and paid services out there right now. There's things like Mint.com or YNAB. You need a budget. Microsoft Money, Excel. And probably 50,000 other ones that I haven't even heard of yet, and they're really amazing. But you can do some research and find. But we all need to have some kind of tracking. We need to be able to see where our money is going and stay on top of that. So we need accountability by tracking our spending. Another one that I would suggest is having a monthly review. It's important that you are active in your finances and that you're paying attention. Avoidance and denial are no longer excuses that we have. We remember this. So we have to stay engaged. So setting one day aside every month, or maybe in the beginning it's every week, to perform a little audit and see how you're doing is critical to staying on track and accountable. This is really, really important, especially if you are married or if we have any kind of couples who are engaged or beginning to think about this. Think about setting this up as a regular rhythm. Money can divide, and Satan is looking for any foothold into our relationships, so communicating often and clearly about your finances is strongly encouraged. And do this on a preset or a regular schedule, so it can take some of the emotion out of the conversation. I'll give you a little hypothetical right now. Let's say that maybe one of you has been staring at the finances a little bit more than the other. You've been seeing some trends going on. And you're like in a car, like a 6-hour road trip, and like one of you is like, hey, how about we listen to Justin Bieber? And you're like, hey, how about you stop spending money at Zara? Oh, explosion, conflict. Oh. Guys, brothers and sisters, hypothetically, learn from my mistakes and know that this is not the proper way to communicate in regards to finances. Setting up regular intervals and discussing things before it becomes an issue is so key and important. And even, making it something that is something to look forward to, add salt and straw to it. It's finances and salt and straw, or whatever it is, add something rewarding to it so you show up and keep that, that meeting with each other. But communicate often and frequently, and show each other grace, show each other love. You guys are a team. Don't let this drive a wedge between you. So that would just be a suggestion there, hypothetically. And I would also say having a partner or a financial professional that you work with and speak to about this regularly would also be good. Don't do this alone. Satan looks to isolate, but Christ brings us into community, okay? So walk alongside others. I'm not telling you to lead with finances with everyone, don't be like, I'm Kyle, I have $40,000 of debt. Whoa, nice to meet you. That's not what I'm saying. Use wisdom, use discernment, but find people in your community who you trust, who are close to you. Find a professional who you can begin to have a relationship with. This would be good. And also know that we are called to be disciples as well as we are called to disciple others, okay? So as you are learning, as you are walking through this in these classes, if you're gathering things that, are benefiting you, don't keep them to yourself, okay? There's only one of, me right here, but there are many, many of you within the congregation. So the hope is that as we begin to walk through these lessons, that you guys are growing in maturity in this area, you grow in confidence, and that you're going to be able to work with other people in this community. People in your community groups, people in the congregation, but also your neighbors, your coworkers, other people like that. Come beside people and don't keep this to yourself, okay? I'm counting on you to become good stewards and people who are able to communicate this in loving and helpful ways to others, okay? So, bring somebody to the next class. That's what that was all about. All right. So, with all that being said, guys, you've made it through week 1. So, give yourselves a round of applause. I've already told you about a few homework items. I'm going to tell you about a few others. Okay, the first being, I want you to ask yourself and your spouse, if you're here with a significant other, what is my family history concerning money? So how was it discussed? How was it used? What did you learn? And how has that influenced my perception or handling of money today? We all have a history and a past when it comes to money, and oftentimes it is influenced by what we grew up in. And so I think it's good for us to sometimes just ask ourselves that question and go, oh, yeah, I saw my parents do things this way or do things that way. And it's also good for us when we're working with somebody else who comes from a totally different place to understand where they're coming from. So ask yourselves that. Next is I want you to review the last 3 to 6 months of your expenses, okay? Compare your actual spending with what you wrote down today and see if it's remotely correct, okay? This is probably, I wanted to say this again, this is probably the most important part of everything that you've done today is this next step right here. If you're going to do anything, make sure that you go in and look over your last 3 to 6 months of expenses and see exactly where you've been spending your money and if it's lining up. And then what I want you to do is I want you to create a new budget. I want you to take all of that information, what you did today, and then I want you to put a new realistic budget down on paper, both income and expenses, fixed and variable. And then what I want you to do is if you have been running a deficit, is I want you to work towards trying to create $100 of surplus within your monthly budget, okay? Now, for some of you, that may be really difficult, and that's why I'm giving it to you as a challenge. This is an arbitrary number, so you may need to do less. Maybe just getting to break even is a huge feat, and that's something to celebrate in. For others of you, you need to be probably creating a much larger surplus. So you find where you feel it needs to be. Pray about it, think about it, work on it, but create a surplus within your budget. And you'll see why. We're going to be needing that for the weeks going forward. The next thing to do is set up a budget tracking program, okay? We need to have accountability, so set up something for budget tracking. And then for next week, we're going to transition from what is our cash flow, what is our budgets, to what is credit and what is debt. How do we use credit as a tool and an asset and not something that is a millstone? And how do we move forward out of debt? What are some strategies to get ourselves out of that place, okay? How do we find hope in hopeless situations? So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. So I need you to bring and gather all of the information on any outstanding debt that you do have. So what we want to have you write down and have in one place is the balances, the minimum payments, interest rates, and this will be for credit cards, student loans, car loans, mortgages, things like that, okay? So I want you to work on that, bring it all in. I apologize. We have totally gone over by about 5 minutes. So we don't really have time for a Q&A. But what I will be doing is we'll probably next week at the beginning answer some of those questions just to start it off. And you can continue to send questions throughout the week if you have other things that come up as you're working on this. I'm going to be down at the front of the stage afterwards, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Pastor Adam will be out there with me as well to answer questions as well if you have, and we'll go from there. Sound good? Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.